Hello and welcome to a summer edition of the 1904 Club. The weather is nice today, Burnsy, although you wouldn't know it from your backdrop, would you?
Yeah, well, it was so sunny, I've had to close the curtains. I look as though I'm in a large phone booth, we're getting my passport photo. And with a face like this, I'm on my passport, I'm not going to get in many countries. There'll be a long queue behind me as the guards look at me. But anyway, morning all.
Hello, Prutts. The last time I saw you, you were on a North Sea ferry watching the England game.
I was. I made it back. It wasn't my intention to go on the ferry again because I'd used it the week before because I was on my bike. But I flew from Hamburg to Schiphol on Saturday morning, all going swimmingly. I then checked on my little KLM app, which then said your next journey is in 18 hours, and it was meant to be Amsterdam to Belfast, Belfast to London, London to Leeds, Bradford, which sounded insane. So double checked it and then had 2 consecutive flights cancelled. So then got a train from there to Rotterdam to get the ferry back overnight to Hull, and then train back from there. So I left the Euros at 9:30 on Saturday morning and got home at 12 o'clock Sunday.
Sounds like great fun.
Planes, trains, and automobiles. It was good. I bumped into some Leeds fans on the ferry. I bumped into some Wednesday fans on the ferry.
That must have been a nightmare.
Do you know what? They're all lovely, as they all tend to be. So they'd all been to Amsterdam for varying partying situations. One was a stag do. I mean, should we discuss what could possibly have gone on in Amsterdam on a stag do? Let's not.
No.
But no, lovely across the board, and England won, which was obviously topping it all off.
I thought they played. Look, I know this is a Hull City podcast, but we'll touch on that quickly because we all watched it, and everybody else watching this would have watched it. I thought actually, given where England were at in the tournament, I thought they played quite well. Just that final ball into the box that created lots of little moments. Nobody in the box. Bit of a similar theme to Hull City last year. Plenty of nice stuff. Lack of cutting edge.
And it just because that was obviously when. As we do use Twitter/X to get questions in for this, and it's a great platform for sharing information very quickly. There's an awful lot of crap on it as well, which I'm almost at a tipping point where I'm probably going to jack it in because you just sit there and because of the multifaceted platforms of what football now is, it's just relentless, and everyone's an expert. Everyone kind of, well, Southgate should be doing this. The over-intellectualisation of football, I'm not saying that we at Sky Sports don't lean into that because we do, and we like to talk about it and break it down. It's just that kind of, we're in a semi-final, but a generation of England fans that would have killed to be semi-finalists, wouldn't they? And now we're doing it. We're not doing it in the right way. It's like, if you don't win football matches in the right way, it's there to be kind of pulled apart. But I understand the medium. I just spend way too much time sat on the loo reading it.
I've got to be honest, I've cut down my usage on it in recent months, and I feel mentally a lot better. Right, let's crack on with the matters at hand because it's been a busy weekend at Hull City. Talks ongoing with Ipswich Town over Jaden, Philogene and Jacob Greaves. The breaking news at the minute is that Greavesy is going to Portman Road or a nearby hospital or the training, whatever. He's certainly going to Suffolk, and he's going to have a medical ahead of a permanent move to Portman Road. Talks remain ongoing with Ipswich at the time of recording this, obviously, with Jaden. And it's understood that Jaden's primary destination at this stage will be Ipswich. That could change. Obviously, Palace are going in hard. Everton are kind of there as well. But as of this morning, the information I've got is that Ipswich are favourites to get Jaden and Jacob. And the fee, while it's kind of under wraps at the minute, I believe is bigger than what has been reported and does include a sizable salon. So financially for City, it is actually quite a good deal. Yes, it could be more, but I guess Burnsy, it's what somebody's willing to pay, and City are going to get a decent fee and protected should Ipswich sell them on in the near future.
So we're thinking what, in the region of 35, 40 million quid for the pair?
No, I think upwards of 35 would be a fair ballpark figure. I know 35 we've reported that 35 plus. I think it would be more than that, and then add-ons on top. So they stand to get, a decent deal. Does it work out? If you said beforehand you get £20 million for each, I think most people would probably say that's you'd always want more. We talked about Archie Gray last week, but it is what it is.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think 3 months ago you would have thought, yeah, that's a good deal, and I still think that's a good deal. But the Archie Gray thing has maybe distorted the market a little bit. I'm pleased for the players, and I think they always wanted to go. And I think if you tie up with Kieran McKenna, you're tying up with one of the brightest talents in the game. Okay, it's going to be a struggle for Ipswich to stay in the division, but if he keeps them in the division, he's a highly sought manager, isn't he? So he'll either get an opportunity at another club or go again at Ipswich, and I think it'll be good for their careers. And the other thing is, they'll play there, whereas you go to maybe a bigger club and your backside's parked on the bench. I can see you nodding, Prutts. Have I said something bright this Monday morning?
Burnsy, you always do. Now we've got rid of the Deadwood Fletch. It's just all brightness and sunshine.
God bless him.
Yeah, God bless him.
Before you go, congratulations, by the way, to Fletch on his gig.
That was going to be my next port of call. Yeah.
He's. I know it was a tough decision for him because he's obviously been at City for a long, long time, 500 games, and he's part of the fabric and the furniture. And but he's embarking on his permanent commentary career, and the chance to cover Scarborough for the BBC, I think, was an opportunity he couldn't turn down. So congrats to Fletch. He will be around. So, but the 1904 club passes on our best wishes to Fletch. But Prutts, I digress.
On the BBC gravy train, isn't he, Burnsy? He's jumped right on that as it's pulling out the station.
I don't know. My gravy train went in the sidings.
Well, it's hit the buses, didn't it, Burnsy?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. I'll be back.
Yeah, I can't disagree with what you're saying there, Burnsy. Like you say, the outlier being Archie Gray and the price paid. There is a kind of loose thread or comparison that you can put with players of a certain age with similar backgrounds, but again, once it gets down the road, it can become quite bespoke because players are quite bespoke, aren't they? With Jacob and with Jaden, you do really feel. I think given how he's kind of come through, I think the amount of games that he's played, I think the standards that he's pushed himself to, with the help, obviously, of teammates and management, means that he does end up in a position where there is a sense of deserving that move to the Premier League. I mean, we saw what Harry Maguire did and Andy Robertson did, albeit with a bit of Premier League experience, of course. But Harry moving to Leicester, then Leicester moving on to Man United. I'm not saying for 1 second that's what Jacob Greaves has done, but that career trajectory and where he is, he needs to be playing games. I think you're right, Burnsy. He'll go to a club in Ipswich and play games. And sometimes when you look at the club and a club that's comprehensively leapfrogged City in the last couple of seasons, coming up from League One, of course, it's not just about what that club's done; it's about who's done it with that club. And it's such a pertinent point to make that Kieran McKenna is a coach that so many footballers I've spoken to and come across that have played for him sing his praises. The ones that are on the outside looking in think I'd love to go and play for him because it's a developmental career move. So I can absolutely see it. Wages wise, that'll change. And again, I think on here when we have discussed things such as this and being from an ex-playing point of view, you can't shy away from that. Your career's a short one. If someone's offering you a bundle of money, sorry, I'd be a large percentage of the time inclined to say go, because then you'll always be operating from a different level. If they go to Ipswich, it doesn't quite work out, then you have made a jump from City's wages to Ipswich's wages in the Premier League, and you may fall between that. Fundamentally, you'll still be kind of better off moving forward. And as for Jaden, yes, that attack-based player that can change games, maybe you think there's a high premium on that, but again, completely unproven, isn't he, in the Premier League? And going to a club that's first port of call is safety. Anywhere above the dotted line, given the fact that we saw the 3 teams go up, come straight back down again, would be a minor miracle. And I mean that with the greatest respect. I've loved watching Ipswich over the last couple of seasons.
Is the fee a straight split between the pair of them? Like if Philogene takes another offer from maybe Palace or Everton, if they're still interested, I don't know. Is it a straight, split in terms of fee, or is it weighed in favour of one of the players? Do you know that at this point?
I think at this stage, talks are ongoing, so they're trying to do a double deal with Ipswich to get both of them to the same place. So I think at the minute it would be a combined fee. In terms of splits, I'm not entirely sure at this stage.
The Palace one's a good one to learn, Burnsy, given the fact that Elise is settled over to Germany, hasn't he? So whether there's a gap in the market or in their squad for someone such as that, but then we've spoken about younger players there maybe getting a chance at Palace that were sometimes linked with City, weren't there? So maybe that gap, maybe they're allowing Elise to go because there's a gap that can be filled by someone actually in the building there at Palace, which maybe takes the attention off Jaden. So. It's these things are never done until they're actually done and signed, because we know that sometimes at the 11th hour something can come and either turn a player's head or can really kind of stick a kind of spanner in the works. So I mean, the more I read about it and the more it was getting chatted over on Twitter after caning the platform last night. That split between panic stations of, oh my God, all of our best players are going, and what the market rate is, a market value is for players, is, I think there was a healthy balance of both, because if it is reported to be this amount of money, and as much as the club have stressed about their finances, whether it's deemed to be shipshape or maybe there's something that needs to be sorted within the building when it comes to money and where it needs to be put to. It's an awful lot of money. It's an awful lot of money. And given what we've seen off the back of COVID and sometimes clubs being a tad spendthrift away from one part of the Premier League, business-wise, you can completely understand. I'm sure that doesn't help any City fans looking at that opening weekend thinking, what's the squad going to look like and where they're going to be? But, I mean, it's not uncharted territory, is it, for City to enter into a season with not the full roster of players and not knowing who's going to be actually wearing that shirt come the first kick of the ball?
And I think that's the concern, isn't it, Burnsy? There is a lot of, we can't shy away from the fact there is a lot of concern, and understandable concern, because you look at the amount of players that have gone since the end of the season. Obviously 5 loan players went. Funny enough, it looks like Liam Delap could be joining Jacob at Ipswich Town. There was the suggestion that he's going to be joining Ipswich from Manchester City. So that would be another hammer blow to City fans, seeing half of last season's team down at Ipswich. But there is a lot of concern, and completely with valid reason for me, because you look at the players they've lost last season. They scored 68 goals, I think it was, in the Championship. And we talked about this on last week's show, that if you look at the amount of goals left in the team now, presuming that Jaden will go, and I think there is an expectation that he will go, that they've got 5 goals left. I think now I was going through the stats the other day. You've got a couple, maybe one from Seri. You've got one here and there. It's one from Jones. It is a concern. And I think when you look at what's gone, they've made one signing in Ryan Giles, but it's my understanding that deal, it was an obligation. They had to do it. And Middlesbrough are pushing really hard to get him. So that could happen very soon as well. Fringe players like Ryan Longman and Jason Aquilo, I think we all expect those to move on before the start of the season. So as yet, if you take out Giles, there is nobody in the building yet. That squad looks painfully thin. There's nobody in attacking areas apart from Abdouche. They are weak, and with only 4 weeks, just over 4 weeks until the season starts, they haven't made any tangible signings. And until those players start coming in, Tim Walter, it's all right doing shape and trying to get his players to, adapt to a new system and a more attacking system. But at the minute, they've got nothing. And that is where fans are getting concerned, Burnsy.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's definitely a case of do panic, Captain Mannering, though I'm going to tell you I don't panic, in my opinion, in a minute. But I just want to big up the 1904 club, because I think we all predicted that, or said, earlier in the season that Ipswich would be a good fit for Delap. Don't be surprised if Ipswich go for Delap. So, well done us. Pats on back for all of us.
Well, we got it
right.
We got it badly wrong. We all on that. We all lauded the signing of Billy Sharp before it was made, and it didn't quite work out. So maybe we unpat ourselves for hailing Billy Sharp.
That's not our fault. That's not our fault.
Billy's fault. Billy's fault. Billy's fault. That nothing to do with us.
Billy or Liam's fault, not our fault. Right. I'm so the do panic Captain Mannering or the don't panic Captain Mannering. I think just for a bit of historical context, there is a quote from me of a tweet I put out a few years back, and I think the quote is inscribed somewhere within the East Stand concourse or the South Stand concourse up on the wall because it makes me look at Charlie. Because I think I tweeted at one point, I'd seen City at Ferriby pre-season. This was under Steve Bruce, and I put out a tweet saying basically, as I see it at the moment, this squad is more chance of getting relegated from the Championship than getting promoted. That it would be a real concern for me. What happened? They got promoted. But it rattled a few cages within the club, that tweet, I'm told, and they started investing in the team for Steve and he got them up and everything like that. So the timescale there was tight. And what I'm sort of clinging to in all this is if they're on it, Adjan and Tan and the rest of the club, and I know there's been a new manager, but they have planned this. We said all along the 5 or 6 loan players would go back. So you have to have a plan to replace them. Okay, we said all along, and it's a reasonable expectation that Philogene and Greaves would go. So you have to have a plan to replace them. You have to be planning for that. Okay, they must post Christmas have been planning to get rid of Liam. Okay, so there has to be a plan. Now, I think, given what's gone on, and the transfer business has not always been brilliant. First season, I think they were signing the wrong players, but there has to be a plan there. Unless they've gone off the rails, there has to be a plan, and they've earned a bit of credit. So I'm prepared to give them a bit of patience because all this was foreseeable. So if they've not seen it, then they want their backsides kicking, but they must have seen it. So don't panic, Captain Mannering.
Prutts, put yourself in that dressing room today. You've obviously come back last Monday, new manager. The dressing room, very, very different place. All those little friendship groups that would have been established last season, second half of last season, with all the loan players coming in as well. All those have gone. New manager. You roll in for work today. Flying out to Turkey for 10 days on Wednesday, and you see that Greaves is down at Ipswich for a medical. You know that Jaden's on his way. You know there's doubts about other players, and rightly so, because we're not giving away any trade secrets here. The likes of Ryan Longman and Jason Lakilo, they're wanted elsewhere. They weren't here last season, or in Lakilo's case,
they weren't good enough, Baz.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't, and they're still not good enough now. If City want to be where they were last season and above, which looks a long way away, admittedly, at the minute, of course. But where are you at as a player in that dressing room? And you're looking around the building going, well, before the final game, we had Fabio Carvalho, we had Liam Delap, we had Tyler Morton, we had Aaron Connolly, although that obviously the season for him kind of petered away in the end. But we had some really, really good players, the likes of Carvalho and Morton and Delap, Ohio, Saruri on his day. Now you've got, with respect, you've got Lakila coming back from Portugal, you've got Ryan Longman coming back from Millwall, you've got Harry Vaughan, who really struggled at Bristol Rovers, you've got a lot of academy kids that'll be making up the numbers. Where are you at mentally?
You're disappointed when your best players go, or your better players go, especially ones that have been a real part of what City have been. There's an understanding of how transient good dressing rooms and good connections can be, because that's just the very nature of football. You're in each other's pockets for a very intense period of time. Then everyone kind of goes their separate ways, and you've got to buddy up with someone else, or you go somewhere else and make new teammates and new friends. The quality of player that we're talking about that has left was still not good enough to get City in the top 6. Now, I think we've already said broadly that the Championship is, on paper, from the looks of it, not as strong as it was last season. So therefore, you're thinking, well, if City finished just outside, then they've got to give it a decent crack to finish just inside. But again, with a caveat of not having the same standard of players. The goals that you're talking about, that's alarming. That's missing. But I do, even though football and football clubs can be chaotic places, it would be very surprising, given how long that Ajan's owned City now and the way that he's dealt with potentially having fingers burnt with players or management appointments, that he's not learned, him and Tan haven't learned an awful lot in a relatively short space of time. So, as Burnsy said, those lone players were pretty much always going to go back. And when you've got good players, you're always fending off interest and attention from clubs in, I won't say bigger clubs, but clubs in better positions with more money, which is what an Ipswich Town is, isn't it, right now? But that's just a matter of absolute fact. So the players need to be getting on with their jobs, again, without just kind of dismissing any of this, because you are mindful of who you're going to be sat next to or who you're going to be in the trenches with, metaphorically, when it comes to the season starting. But they've got to see what the new manager wants, adapt to what the new manager wants. I've said it before, selfishly, you're thinking, well, he might have gone, so he's gone. So does that mean give me a chance of getting in the side? Therefore, that's my next port of call as a player, being in his first 11 that he picks for the opening game of the season. And trusting in the process that they're going to bring good players in, the right players as well, that help to kind of mould a good dressing room. Because I do echo Burns' positivity, but I also sound that note of caution where you've got a new manager in a division that's totally unforgiving. And if you look at that squad at the moment, you are not saying it's finishing in the top six. With the greatest respect to the players that are there.
No chance. No chance at this stage.
No, you're not. So that's when you think about that's where when it comes having. If you're following City in its current incarnation, you're hoping for incremental progress, but seeing what's happened, because that flies in the face of what football is. It's so immediate that progress can get cut in half very quickly. You have players that have good seasons and everyone talks about them. Someone goes, here you go, he's 15 million quid for it. Well, he's gone, done. So then you start that process again. Without sounding too overtly positive, it gives the likes of, like say, Longman and Lakilo a chance to come and impress. A new set of eyes can sometimes bring something else out of a player. But make no mistake, they do need recruitments. And as ever, the earlier you get them in, the better it is for when the season starts, isn't it?
Burnsy?
I take the point, but to some extent, I know it's a whole, but the coach, if we parked it to one side, he's going to need time to adjust, isn't he? The main thing is he has the resources, he has the players to impose his style, and then we'll see what he's about. My point is they should have planned all this. They should have a long list of players that knew all these scenarios were coming. So they should have planned it. If they get the players in, then we go to is the coach up to it? Can he adapt to Championship football? Can he provide with those resources? But it's down to them to provide the resources, and they should have planned for it. So I'm trying to be balanced about it, but I don't. And hopefully they'll do it. And I know it's difficult to get players in, but it's not necessarily been a problem for them before.
No, I think you're absolutely right. That sometimes, as we all know, that there's a certain domino effect to how transfers do work. If people are getting slotted in somewhere else and so on, that list of potential recruits might change. It's got to be relatively fluid, but the type of player, and because everyone talks about players in numbers now, don't they? The type of players should be identified quite a bit down the line. Now, we spoke and heard a lot about Liam Rosenior's connections with big clubs and people that respected him for what he did with younger players. Therefore, that was seen as quite a positive thing to get players in the door at City. Whether you start that again with Tim, possibly, I think, because he's an unknown quantity, with the greatest respect, an unknown quantity in English football, isn't he? Or whether there's a good whether Hull City is reputationally have that of, well, they do help to develop players, but hopefully that still sticks. Not regardless of who's in charge, but that still sticks. Yeah.
That's a very good point. Baz, I know it's a bit me and Prutts at the moment. I just want to say one thing I spotted today. There's an interview with Liam Rosenior on a website called The Coach's Voice. And I was reading it with interest. And this relates to what you're saying, Prutts, about the players. To quote him, the likes of Carvalho, Delap and Philogene signed for me because of human connection. I made an effort to see them and get to know them. And he will have been a big factor in that. And
huge.
I think that reinforces the point Prutts is making, Baz.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The manager was, Liam was hugely pivotal in getting those sorts of players. And it was a club, the club worked hard, Ajun and his people did their bit. But ultimately, a player speaks to a manager, doesn't he, Prutts? A player will speak to a manager, and that player will get a feeling for whether he wants to be part of it or not. And if he speaks to manager A and he's like, I'm not so sure, but he speaks to manager B and goes, I really want to play for him. While manager A might be at a bigger club or a more perceived fashionable club, actually, he feels manager B is better for his career. And I think that is exactly what happened at Hull City in January when Fabio Carvalho basically had the pick of the championship, including Southampton. Russell Martin went in massively hard. Very aggressive Russell Martin was in trying to get Carvalho, but he still picked City, and Liam was a big factor. So they've lost that, and we can try and sugarcoat it all we want, but they have lost that that connection, and now it's up to the new manager and the club, Ajun Tan, and the people around the football club to put Tim in a position that he can have those conversations, and it's up to then Tim Volter to convince players that actually Hull City is still a club that you can progress at, that you can develop, and you can enjoy playing your football, and you can be successful. The problem City have got at the minute.
Charming at the press conference. He was charming at the press conference.
Yeah.
If you were a player sitting down with him, you'd think, oh, why? There's a certain charm about him. You'd think, yeah, okay, fair enough. The other factor in all this is with Philogene and Greaves going, suddenly they've got a bit more buns to spend, haven't they?
Well, that's the thing.
They might decide to throw it at up the wages a bit or whatever.
I had a conversation with somebody on Saturday, and the feeling was that when the deal is done, that will give them, they are prepared to invest. They are, this isn't a case of, oh, we're going to take X amount of million and run for the hills, and we're going to pocket it, or we're going to, yes, there are costs that they have to pay off from previous, but they will look to, spend. There is still 4 weeks to go. I think the key thing for City, and particularly from a PR point of view, the club under Ajun, the PR has always been, first rate. It's always been top notch. They've been very good at playing that PR game. Probably since the end of the season, it's the first time where genuine questions are being asked of the leadership and of where the club is going and what their intentions are, having sacked a manager after finishing 7th. Those questions aren't going to go away, and those questions are only getting louder and more and greater in quantity, because no players have yet arrived, Giles aside, and players are leaving. Until players start arriving and we can see actually where they want to go and the quality of player they're going to bring. We don't want quantity. We don't want suddenly by the end of the week 10 players that have arrived and they're all of awful standard and they're not good. City are going to go down or they're going to face a relegation battle. I'd rather they wait 3 weeks and bring in 4 or 5 players that are better than what they've got and are going to make a difference, rather than bringing in 10 players now that are just going to saddle the wages and drag them down to the bottom end of the table. So they still have to be the right players, a point that Tim was at pains to point out in his very first press conference. But I think they do need that first signing that comes in and people can go, fans can go, it's going to be okay. We're on the right track. Players are starting to arrive. And that player that's come in, that's a sign. Other players, potential new recruits will see that and think, yeah, Hull City mean business this year. That's a club I want to go and be part of because they can challenge in the top half of the table. They're not a club that are going to be, I'm going to be in a relegation battle. Because at the minute, make no bones about it, with the squad they've got, they are in a relegation battle. But we are a month away from the start of the season. So there is still time. And it isn't panic stations yet. They have got time.
Okay, I'm panicking for Prutts because I know he's got an appointment. So you're all right. I'm being your human alarm clock here, Prutts. You're right.
You're great, Burnsy. Yeah, no, sorry, I was just listening to the impassioned thoughts of you two. No, you're absolutely right. I'll be intrigued because you know what you know what it's like about debate and about opinion. If that new player is, I don't know, from overseas, if there's a little knowledge of him. It's just that patience and waiting game, isn't it? Because, as you say, stacking it with players just for the sake of it doesn't make any sense, both financially and from a team spirit and a team ethic point of view. But I'm intrigued to see how the next 4 weeks does pan out because it'll be. We've said that now, and that'll go like that. The next minute we'll be looking at that opening game of the season, thinking, "Christ, it's tomorrow, won't we?" That's how we'll kind of think about it. So. A lot of work to be done, but again, City not in uncharted territory with hopefully, as you say, from a PR point of view, very apart from obviously with the fallout from Liam moving on and then all the discussion and how Ajan stepped forward and spoke about it, I'd say he's pretty much dealt with situations either self-created or thrown at him pretty well, hasn't he? Pretty well. So there's hopefully got to be an element of trust. I'm not saying that you take everything as gospel from people inside football clubs at all, because again, I've not spent, I don't know, 20 million quid on a football team. So when suddenly potentially you get 40 back in, you'd be quite well within your rights to go, so let's just box that off there for a little bit. Just keep that little chunk sticking over there, and then what's available for the manager will be there for us all to see. The other part about this is as well, we're talking about Tim and what he's going to bring to the side. He wants to make a splash in English football. He doesn't want to come in with his hands tied behind his back and take over a club that's struggling at the bottom of the Championship. He'll be, and from the sounds of it and where he's been, he's a very, very ambitious coach. So sometimes we can forget that about managers, that they are voraciously ambitious as everyone else involved in football. He wants this to be a success, and he will absolutely be on at the owner and the head of recruitment to say, I want it to be a success, and I need these or that or this bunch of players to make it a success. So there'll be he'll be as on this as any of the most avid City fan, because he needs it to be a success. You don't want muppets like me 2 weeks into the season going, well, they shouldn't have got rid of Liam. This is what's happened. They've done this. Like, they've had a terrible August. We're into September now, and then suddenly people start chatting and all the noise comes up. He wants to hit the ground running.
Again, I go back to the planning. He'll have known that he was going to get this job for some time, that it was going to be his. So again,
and what the parameters would be, what would be there, who would be there, who's going back,
and the conversations would be had, and the lists would be exchanged and everything like that. I mean, I'm basing this on they've done their planning. And you know, it's not an exact science, is it? But they'll have known their targets, and they'll have known their targets dependent on budget. Ajan said he had 13-14 million quid he thought he could spend without breaching the whatever the financial regulations are called, and whichever aspect of it is. The Greaves money, I think, changes the parameters of that. So suddenly you can go after a player that might have been out your financial reach before. But for me, it comes down to the planning. How boring is that? But it does, and he should have done it. I keep trying to, I'm banging on about it, but that's how I see it.
And not wishing to labour a point too much, because we've made this before, but when you see McKenna coming in for Greavesy and Philogene, and he's trying to sign Delap, and you think of players like Morton and Carvalho. Even Zarori, I know he scored 3 goals, but he got injured and it perhaps didn't work out. But it does leave you with that sense of frustration that City had such a good team last season. They had such a big opportunity to get into the playoffs and get promoted. I'm not saying they would have got promoted, but they should have got, with that squad, with the squad at that disposal of the manager and the coaching staff, they should have got in the playoffs. And I think they're paying that price now for not so many games last season where they just weren't quite good enough, and perhaps were a bit tentative, and they just, that is the overriding frustration. I don't want to call it a fire sale because that overly dramatizes it. But when you think that you're losing your two best players, your two most effective, your best defender, and you're losing your leading goal scorer, 12 goals and 6 assists last season. That was such a good team last year, and they just, for whatever reason, and we've debated it all from everybody's talked it to death. They have blown it, and they're having to pick up the pieces. And I feel for Volta because he's coming in now. He's got the first pre-season game on Saturday at the training ground in Riva, and he's going to be picking a team that's going to be maybe the back 5-6 is probably what will start. Greaves aside is what probably will start the first game of the season. You'd think that you look at Pandora will probably start in goal, Jacob at left back, Coyle at right back, Alfie Jones and Sean McLaughlin will be your two centre halves. Then you probably have, depending on what he does with his formation, Seri and Slater are probably your two midfielders. And then you've got, I guess you're going to have probably Longman. If these players travel, you'd have Longman, Lakilo one side. And up front, it might be Abdush might be there somewhere. You'd have Sellers, Fleming. But the team that starts that friendly Saturday afternoon will be it'll be non-existent compared to the team that starts against Bristol City, and then plays against Leeds after on the final day of the transfer window, and then plays the first game after the transfer window. So there's so much to sort out. But while there is a bit of time, and yes, there's 4 weeks to go, they're out in Turkey for 10 days. They come back. They've got Doncaster on the 23rd, then Newcastle, then Fiorentina, and then Reading away. And then before you know it, that's Reading away is the last Saturday, the 3rd or 4th of August. And then you've got 1 week and you're into the first game of the season. What they can't afford to do is lose the first 2 months of the season because they're not prepared. They've got to get moving. They've got to be prepared for the first game. I know that every club in the Championship will have doubts about their squad until the window closes at the end of August. But City have got to give themselves a chance, and they've got to give Volta a fighting chance.
Can't disagree with any of that, Baz. It's absolutely right, and I think it's trying to sound that balance of positivity with that bit of caution, which I think I think to a certain extent we've done, because you can't. The Championship is hard enough, obviously, without kind of hamstringing yourself by getting rid of the best players, not being able to kind of fit it back in, but. What I've seen with Championship teams over the last, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and then what gets you up? Yes, there are stellar players that have stood out, that have done very, very special things and driven clubs forward. But there are teams of players that have come together. Ipswich, for example, Sheffield United under Chris Wilder. Just two examples there of good recruitment, good team spirit, and a way of playing that was attractive, that was attacking, and that could kill games off. Now, as I've always said on here, love Liam to bits, and his style of football wasn't one that Ajan wanted to carry on with, and many times we spoke about whether they could kill games off. And then maybe, just maybe, you bring in a manager that steps forward into the attacking part of what putting a team together is. So he steps forward, which puts him slightly in front of Liam, but the squad takes a step back because the quality of the squad is different. But maybe the gap that the manager brings bridges that. You don't know. Like I said, it sounds a bit fanciful and a bit twee, but given what it takes to get out of the Championship, which is consistency, you just never know who they assemble and who kicks the ball or kicks the season off in August. The dynamics and the chemistry of that team might take it further than what City had last season, because, as we said, they weren't a million miles away from it. But when you end up in the team that finishes a place outside the top 6 and then your team falls apart, you might as well finish 10th or bottom half, because you end up in kind of the same situation, don't you?
Prutts, I know you've got to Skeaddle, haven't you? Go on, Burnsy.
I have. Sorry. I said all that and then didn't give anyone a right to reply.
It wasn't worth it.
It's all right. I was just there's a lot of reaction coming in on Twitter to the 1904 club. Harry Bullymont says, I think the concern for the fans isn't the loss of key players. it's the lack of rumours. Normally, news outlets are littered with rumours of incoming players, yet this time around there are very few and far between. It's a reasonable point. It's a perception, isn't it? It's all the talk really is of players leaving rather than. I mean, we talked last week about quite a lot of names. Where they at, Baz? Can you tell?
Well, it's perception. And just before I sign off, chaps, it's perception about again, City being a destination football club of people wanting to come, of people and players seeing it as a place to develop, whether that's mutually beneficial, they develop and the club does better and then they move on. We totally get where City stand in the footballing firmament, because a lot of clubs are like that. There will be a stepping stone for players. But as long as those players are taking it in the right direction, which is knocking on the door of the top six. And I think possibly we're in a bit of a holding pattern where players that potentially are coming are just sounding out what's going on. They want to understand what City is, who the new manager is, what the potential is, and what the chances are of having another season where across the board City were spoken about very fondly, weren't they, in footballing circles and with fans and pundits alike. They were an attractive football club to go and play for. That's got to be maintained. That's got to be carried on.
I'm going to have a lie down after this 1904 club, because maybe I'm being
that's just your own age.
Over positive or anything like that. But I'm just listening to Prutts make his point there. If I don't know whether you look at it as a player, but Andy Robertson came into City playing in the Euros. Harry Maguire, captain of Manchester United. Jared Bowen playing for England at the Euros. Keane Lewis-Potter in the Premier League. Seeing Jacob Greaves go to the Premier League. Saying Jaden Philogene go to the Premier League. Saying Liam Delap go to the Premier League. Seeing Fabio Carvalho resurrect his career and get a higher profile. And you think, do you look at that and think, actually, they've got a track record. I'll get a chance to play there and I'll get a chance to advance my career.
I think you do. Yes, you've got to take into account special managers in that period of time that have helped players.
Yeah,
Steve Bruce obviously being one that we spoke to. But as a club, I could see that being a resolutely positive thing where you do well, you get your chance. And again, like I said, it's got to be mutually beneficial, whether that's monetary-wise for City or whether that's getting them promoted in the interim or getting in the top six in the interim. But I think it has proven itself to be a place in recent seasons where you're not going, and I'm saying this to City fans who adore the football club. It's not some footballing backwater, is it? I know they've dipped the toe into League One, and there's been some times when it's looked a bit stressful, but this is a former Premier League football club, so it should have the respect of that and being able to be seen as somewhere where a player can go and take that next step or develop a bit more. Maybe where the focus and pressure and the ability to go and play is one that's an encouraging place to go and play the football to show how good they are. That's something that City should really be proud of. Not to the point where you're always the bridesmaid and never the bride and staying outside the Premier League for long patches of time, but in the sense of when you're not at the top and challenging the top two, you've got to be in that next kind of batch of horses in the race with players that want to be there, with players that know if they do perform, it's great for City, it's great for them, and it's great for the dynamic of the club.
Prutts, do you need to?
And on that bombshell, yes. Sorry, guys, you can talk about me when I go now. It's fine.
Yeah, we will. We'll
talk about your hair.
Yeah, and I'll keep messing with it. Sorry. But anyway, it's been lovely. Sorry, it's a very quick dip in, but we go again next week, don't we?
We go again next week.
Yes.
Coming in your ears from Istanbul, somewhere in Istanbul.
Right, take it easy, lovelies.
Love you, bye.
Love you, bye.
Cheers, Prutts.
Thank Christ
right then, Baz. That's harsh. He's a lovely lad. I enjoy this conversations with him every week on the 1904 Club.
He's fantastic, and thanks for giving up his time to keep joining us. He keeps coming back. I don't know. He only wanted to come for it. I only invited him for a week, and then almost a year on, he's still here. He just keeps on coming.
Right. It's good. I love his insight. I'll get to some of the messages in a bit, but is there any names kicking out? We talked about Chris Willock, who I think we all agreed on the 1904 Club would snap his hand off if he said he was available.
I think absolutely.
QPR are trying to keep him, aren't they? What's the latest?
Yeah, well, you would do, wouldn't you? Let's be fair. He's a very, very good player at this level. Still, he's only 26. He's got a lot of mileage left in him yet, and they tried hard to sign him in January. So for me, I think, look, it's one of those. Willock is one of those players that if you're selling Jaden, which, look, none of us want to lose Jaden. He's a joy to watch. He gave us some memorable moments. And football for me, Burnsy, you take away all the crap. Football for me is about making memories. It's about going and enjoying it. And there were so many occasions last season where Jaden, I came away from the ground feeling like I'd really enjoyed watching a player play. But he's ambitious. You know, City, if you think, and I don't want anybody to quote me on these figures here, but if you think that City paid $4.5 million for him in August last year, and 10 months on, they're going to sell him for the best part of £20 million. That, by anybody's standards, is terrific business. They bought a player for under £5 million, and they've made £15 million on him in less than a year. Now, you don't want to lose your best players, but the reality of being a championship club, as we've said before, without parachute payments, is that you have to sell your best players, but it's how you reinvest. Now, the challenge for them is to do that. Willock would be on a free transfer. Yes, his salary would be decent. He's a championship player, and he's coming from a club in London where they would naturally pay more. So Willock for me would be a fantastic signing on a free transfer. There was huge interest in him in January. It didn't happen. QPR naturally are pushing hard to try and keep him, as you would do. He has other interest. If I was City, I'd be, if I was Tim Walter, I'd be doing what Liam did. I'd be driving down to West London and trying to meet him and tell him how much you value him. Another player is Raksaki. He was inches away from being a City player on deadline day back in the summer last year, until Crystal Palace, having said yes, then said no, because they decided the makeup of their squad needed Raksaki to be involved. He featured, I think, 3 of the last 4 games for Oliver Glasner at the back end of the season, but I think he's only played 100 or so minutes of Premier League football in the season, which is nowhere near enough for a player of his calibre. Again, another, whether that's a loan deal, realistically it probably would be because of the finances involved in getting him out on a permanent basis. But there's 2 players there. If you sign Willock on a permanent deal, give him a 3-year contract, he's got security. You bring in Raksaki on one of your 5 loans. That would, I think, those 2 players alone would make other people in football, other potential signings in football, more importantly, go, they're 2 good signings. I think the fans would look at that and go, they're sensible championship signings. We're not plucking somebody from God knows where that's got no profile that we're lumping a lot of money on in the hope of it working. They would be 2 sensible signings. Now we'll have to wait and see. The striker we talked about, Selar, is it Selar or Zelar from the Slovenian guy? That isn't. I don't believe that's happening from what I've been told. The striker target is a good one. If that came off, I can't say anything at this stage because I've been asked to keep it firmly under wraps. But if that comes off, I think that would be a very, very good signing. I think people would be okay with that, and would think that he's a decent outlet. Look, they've got to work hard. There's no bones about it, Burnsy. They've got to get on with it because time is running out. Yes, as I've said before, and we've talked about this just now, there's a month left, but that month will elapse very, very quickly. Before you know it, the season will be here. So hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully there will be some information that we can put out in the next 24 hours or so that will maybe put a bit more meat on the bones, that will maybe give fans, it's not my job to appease fans and, tell them what to think, but hopefully what we can put out in the next few hours will depending on obviously when you listen to this, will giving it a bit of an insight into what might or might not come. But you've got some more questions, I think.
No, well, I'll come to that in a bit. It's interesting about the striker. Can you give us any clues? I'm not trying to drop you in it, Baz. No,
his experience. The player concerned. If again, it's. I'm not lumping. I don't want to lump stuff in the basket, but he's experienced. He scores goals. He's got a very, very good record. So we'll have to wait and see. It's not a done deal. So they're trying to be really cautious right now. I think I get the feeling they are acutely aware of the strength of feeling. They are.
I'm sure.
They know what fans are saying. They know that fans are worried, but also what they don't want to do is just go and sign Joe Bloggs, knowing that he's rubbish, and they're paying £15,000 a week for a player that's absolute rubbish, just to say so fans can go, we've made a signing. They have to be, again, it has to be the right signing. So, but the pressure's on. Make no mistake about it. The pressure is on them because, you know, for a lot of Ajan's tenure, it's all been positive. There's a lot of positivity about for the first time, genuine questions are being asked, and they have to come up with the answers because the optics of it, as we sit here now, they don't look great. We can't get away from that. They don't look great. They've got a very, very weak squad. They've got a new manager that's never managed in England before, and they've got 4 weeks until the season starts. They play the first pre-season game on Saturday. So, and there's so much doubt about players that are still going to leave. So until quality players start arriving, I think fans are still going to be concerned. Yes, you're right to say also not to panic. The time isn't now to panic and hit the panic button. Although some already have, understandably, I get it. That's the nature of football commentary. But people are looking and watching with great interest what happens next.
Indeed, there was a couple of points. It's interesting you said Sellar's not on the list, because I was going to make the point, if they are looking at anybody at the Euros, I mean that's not necessarily going to calm anybody down, because they're going to have a month off, or at least 2 or 3 weeks off, because they've been playing in the tournament, so they're going to need a break. So if anybody's coming in from there, and I don't know whether anybody is, then they ain't coming with the rest of the squad. Yeah, fair point. Are they looking at anybody at the Euros? They've got to be, haven't they?
I think they would be, but again, I think they've still got their targets that they had before the Euro started, and you also have to be careful about not so many teams throughout history have watched World Cups and European Championships and potentially Copa Americas as well, those other tournaments around the world that we rarely speak of, and gone, oh, he looks all right. He's had three half decent group games and plunged into signing him, and actually not that great. So you also have to be, there's that word of caution that just because somebody has looked decent for in spells in games in a European in a major tournament, that they're suddenly going to come and rip it up in the Championship. I think you have to be really careful not to fall into that trap of doing it. Still do your due diligence. If you see a player in the Euros, do your due diligence and make sure that he ticks the boxes. No, fine. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I think I've lost my train of thought. I'll try and get it back, which is difficult. I'm not that mentally capable.
It's all right. Crack on. We've had a lot of train stuff today. Simon Green sent me a message because somebody's been posting on Twitter that Tyler Morton has been liking City posts and calling Louis Coyle Skip and things like that. And, people get excited and read stuff into what goes on social media. And, there seems to be some thinking that he might be coming back. Is there anything in that?
I've not heard that, to be fair. I know they're looking at McConnell. They've been looking at McConnell from Liverpool. But I'm not sure
that last week, didn't we?
Yeah, that's not something I'm aware of. That's not to say there's not interest. But there's been a lot of talk about Morton leaving permanently. I know Leipzig were interested in. The suggestion was that Leipzig were looking at buying him permanently. I don't see Tyler getting into Liverpool's first team, but I think if he was available and he was willing to come back, I think it's certainly something I'd consider. Particularly given he knows the club and he was good last year, and I think he'd benefit from another year in the Championship, definitely. But again, look, you have to. I think that what's worth pointing out with that is, I didn't get a chance to mention this to Prutts, but Billy Sharp has been saying that the dressing room at City last season, in the second half of the last season after he arrived, was one of the best he's ever been. He's been part of. So, those players, a lot of those players would have built up strong connections, strong friendships, and they don't suddenly end because Tyler Morton's left and gone back to Liverpool. He will still keep in touch with Louis Coyle, particularly given Louis Coyle's influence on the football club and particularly the new players as well. The new players that arrived, Louis was was hugely significant in helping those players settle not only into the football club but the area as well. So it's not a huge surprise to see players like Tyler Morton liking social media posts, but I wouldn't always necessarily read anything into it.
Dan the Skint Northerner says, I could get hunted for this question, chaps, but would we have been better off this summer on the pitch only if we'd stuck with the Alam's Brentford model over the years, building a squad slowly with cheap, smart recruitment, usually grafters, versus what we're left with now? But I can sort of see it. But Brentford sell players as well, don't they? And that's the model. It's just there's been a lot of churn this summer, and
that's always the problem, isn't it? When there's so much turnover, every summer you're changing 10, 12, 15 players. But that is the nature of the Championship, I'm afraid, and particularly clubs that don't have the financial power to go and sign players on big money. City don't have that luxury. Yeah, they've got an ambitious owner, but he's still restricted in what he can and can't spend. And that thing, there is a lot of, ideally, the best run clubs with the best squads don't churn that quantity of players every summer. They make 2-3 additions every window. But that we're talking at the very, very top level. We're talking Manchester City level. The reality of a club like Hull City in their situation is players come to the end of the contract, they either get kept or they get moved on. Particularly when you change a manager, a manager, I think, let's be fair, if Liam stays, I don't think we have the level of churn that we do. I think everything is much calmer. The loan players, yes, go, but more they're replaced. They will, City will sign players on loan as well. They will look to maximise all 5 spots. So I would be surprised if by the end of the window we've not got 5 loan players in from Liverpool, from Manchester City, from clubs of like they've done before. So that is the area they will employ.
Planned. Just mentioning Liam Rosenior, it's worth everybody having a read of, if you can find it, it's on the internet, The Coach's Voice. He's done an interview with them. It's worth a read. I read it. I was entertained. I was informed by it, so worth checking out. Nigel says to the 1904 Club, are the Giles rumours true? Makes no sense other than selling for pure profit. They'll turn a profit on the deal. Giles goes to Middlesbrough, won't they?
I'm not sure that Middlesbrough are paying more than what City paid. I'm not sure that Middlesbrough, and I think if you listen to those that know around Middlesbrough, there's no expectation that they're going to be paying that. So we'll have to wait and see what the makeup of the deal is. It's still my expectation that is a deal that will get done. I know there's a lot of fans claiming that they know what is going on with that and suggesting that talk of Giles going to Middlesbrough is ridiculous. Well, we don't just dream these things up. These things that we put out are well sourced, and I think when you have to bear in mind when you're dealing with Hull City and Middlesbrough, the people that are putting these stories out have an element of good contacts, and these stories come from solid places, so they're not just dreamt up. There is interest from Middlesbrough. Giles is keen on the deal, but Middlesbrough would have liked to I think, signed him direct from Luton. That couldn't happen because City had, however we want to phrase it, and I know there's a lot of conjecture about how the deal was done, whether it was an option to buy, obligation to buy. The semantics are relatively immaterial. The fact is Hull City had to buy him from Luton, and they bought him from Luton, as we can see. Whether terminology on club stories says options or the obligation, it doesn't really matter. We're pouring over spilt milk. The fact is, City had to buy Ryan Giles from Luton. They've activated that clause, which they had to do. Now they're in discussions, I believe, with Middlesbrough over how that deal is structured, how it is done. And my expectation, Burnsy, is that Ryan Giles will join Middlesbrough on a permanent basis at some point. There's no guarantees. This is the transfer window. What we can say we expect today isn't necessarily what we expect is going to be the case tomorrow. But as we sit here now, the expectation, I think, between in East Yorkshire and on Teesside is that Ryan Giles will go to Middlesbrough.
Okay. The Lemon Kid to the 1904 Club. Can we talk fan hypocrisy? Adjan ruined the largest headroom left to him when he bought the club. His naive attempts in 2 windows have left us where we are now. He sold KLP. Well, KLP wanted to go. Now Jaden and Greaves, again, they wanted to go, and I don't think you can stand in the way. The squad left is embarrassing, and the time scale to right it is very tight. The pressure on his new manager will be enormous, and this gives him no help. Had the Alams left a situation like this, there would be demonstrations. I know you say he has credit in the bank. I do think he's got credit in the bank. But how long does that last? You have to admit it's all far from ideal. It's not ideal for anybody, and I know, but to me, it's a solvable situation. And I come back to where I started. Really, it's all in the planning. None of this should be a surprise to us in terms of all this was going to happen. And I don't think you can stand in players' ways these days.
I think, look, as fans, Burnsy, we all have this idealistic logic that players want to play for our football clubs forever. They never want to leave, and if they want to leave, then we hate them, we fall out with them, and we want them to. We want to erase them from our memories. Football players, they're human beings. They want to play at the top level. They want to earn more money, and I don't think anybody of sane Hull City mind could begrudge Jacob Greaves the opportunity to play in the Premier League. I think we've all said it at the end of last season that given how good he was, the way he's played for this, the effort he's put in, what he's given to this football club since he's come through the academy, I don't think anybody could begrudge him a move. And he deserves it. Jaden came last season. He turned down a host of other clubs to come to Hull City. He's had a good season. He wants to go and play in the Premier League. You can't begrudge players. As much as you can stamp your feet and shout your mouth off, you can't begrudge players wanting the opportunity to go and play in the Premier League. They all want to get. It's you go through that Hull City dressing room and speak to every single player. They all want to play in the Premier League, and if that opportunity comes, they're going to want to go. They want to go and take it. Of course, they want to do it with Hull City. Jacob Greaves would have loved. He would have given absolutely everything in his ability to be playing Premier League football with a club that he loves to his very core. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. It didn't happen last season, and now he's got the opportunity to go and play somewhere else in the Premier League and take a massive step forward in his career. Nobody can begrudge him that, and that is just the reality of being a club in the Championship. You always will get picked off if you do not get in the. And we see Premier League clubs getting picked off because of PSR. We've seen how many clubs in the Premier League already this summer have had to sell some of their best players. Newcastle have just sold Elliot Anderson to Nottingham Forest for £35 million. They didn't want to sell him. He's 21. He's come through their academy. He's local. They didn't want to sell him, but they've had to sell him because of PSR. It's slightly different in City. Yes, they want to fall within PSR guidelines, but they have also got players that want to go and play in the Premier League now. You don't know how long Jacob Greaves' career is going to go on for. Hopefully, another 10, 12 years. But he doesn't know that, and that opportunity might not come along again.
I'm going to read a couple because I'm conscious of the time, Baz, that sort of balance the debate we've had on the 1904 club today. Matty Hayward says the club isn't immune to criticism. I think we'd all accept that, and none of us have been.
I think we've been fair with that, Burnsy. Just before we go any further, I think we've been fair on this pod all the way through since we started, but particularly today, saying yes, there's pressure on. They've got to get moving quickly because at the minute that team is a relegation team. But we're not. The season doesn't start today. It starts in 4 weeks' time, and the window doesn't close for another I don't know, not how many weeks. We've got till the 31st of August, so we've got a while, and a lot of business happens at the end of the window. But you've also got to give them time.
Yeah, I was just going to finish Matty's thing. The club isn't immune to criticism, as some seem to think. Since the end of May, the club's behaviour has been very bizarre. Can't deny it. All we can do is, that's his words, not mine. All we can do is hope we sort ourselves out because we literally have a relegation fodder squad at the moment, whether people are like it or not, where Jody Sticklin is maybe on the other side. Jody, thank you for getting in touch with the 1904 club. If the 35 million for Greaves and Jaden goes through, plus the 15 million quid that Adjan can put in, that's some money to invest in a first team squad. 50 million should be enough to get you knocking on the playoff door. Need to see some players linked and coming in, though. Still positive up the Tigers. We've had loads, and thank you very much for all your messages and everything like that to the 1904 club. HCAFC thoughts asked a good question. We talk about it every week. Any indication on whether Oscar is going to be recalled? There's a striker. Anything? Have you picked up anything, Baz?
Not at this stage. No, not at this stage, but that's something that we'll look to try and get some more information out over next week. Obviously, we're all out in Turkey from Wednesday, so hopefully we'll have a lot more information. We're expecting to speak to the manager before the end of the week, so that will be really interesting to see what he's got to say. There's the first friendly on Saturday, so we'll speak to him after that as well, I suspect. And then, you know, I'm cautious at this stage because of where we are. I'm conscious of timescales, but I also expect things will start to pick up. They need to, of course. I expect things will start to pick up this week and into next week as well. If they don't, I mean, look, you've got two choices. They either start signing some players and they start to put a squad together to give the manager a chance, or they don't. One or two things are going to happen. But I have to believe, we have to believe that will happen and that players will start arriving. I know things are going on behind the scenes. Just because it's not being played out in public, I don't, fully enough as me saying this, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. That as long as things are going on behind the scenes and discussions are being had with players and agents away from the public glare, I'd love to be putting names out every morning. Of course I would. But I also understand that sometimes that's not the best thing. Sometimes it's good to be trying to get things done quietly behind the scenes. So fans will be hoping that is exactly what is happening.
Well, let's see what happens. It's gonna be fascinating. It's gonna be intriguing. Enjoy Turkey, Baz. Don't forget the factor 50, and go easy on the all-inclusive buffet every day.
Yeah.
All right. You don't want to end up looking like me, son.
I'm on the way. We will be recording regular podcasts out in Turkey, so do keep across. Obviously, the site, the YouTube channel, etc., wherever you get your podcasts from. We will be recording before game, after game. We'll hope to have some special interviews as well. But yeah, thanks to Prutts for joining us for 5 minutes. Also, as I mentioned at the top of the show, congratulations to our old friend Fletch on his new gig, covering a place I love to pieces. I love Scarborough. Absolutely love it to pieces. So good luck to Fletch. He will be popping in now and then, I'm sure. We are planning a special live event in the run up to the new season. He's already committed to coming to that, as have you, Burnsy, and myself. And we may hopefully have in the next few days a special guest or two to announce. So stay tuned. So look, thanks for getting in touch, everybody. Keep in touch as always at the 1904 Club. Burnsy, we'll speak again soon.